I do a short introduction for Irgen and his office, AfU, because yeah, most students they quite know the big names in Netherlands. It's kind of but they have a lot young generations such as Irgen and his office AfU also contribute a lot for the design aesthetic or design research and processing in Netherlands. They have a strong connection with this kind of big office in Netherlands, and also they did a lot works. Even some works are going to be built in the future. So it's also interesting to be introduced or split this kind of knowledge to the students in China or around the world. So that's why our office going to in the future also going to organize more this kind of lectures to cooperate with the office such as a small office, not so many people, but there's really concentrate on design and research and give us super interesting topics according to their methodology and knowledge. So today we are really glad to invite AfU and Irgen from Rotterdam, and they did so many interesting competition projects, and some project is going to be built. And Irgen, he has a strong background. He's studying in Greece, and exchange in Italy, and he worked with MADV, OMA, Meccano, such as a big office in Netherlands, and he did a lot public project in this office and in his own practice. And this lecture is going to show their methodologies about their design and cooperate with, combine with his experience. So it will be really interesting to talk about the public space. And the public space is not only one simple topic or simple meaning. There will be diversified into different levels of society. It will be socialized with our social life. So I think this kind of topic it will be extreme different what you are doing in school or in China. Sometimes you focus on the form of the building, but you lose the meaning of the design. So this kind of a public space of opportunities will be open your eye or open your mind to understand except the formation. What is other approach, or what is other thinking or methodology can be effective of buildings. And I repeat so many times, we are not doing the aesthetic form. We are doing the meanings for the societies. We are working for the meaning of the societies. It's not we're not only the artists for the design. So let's welcome Irgen to much more detail explain what he will doing for this presentation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kai, for the introduction and for the invitation. The second lecture we do together for the students in China, and I'm really happy to actually share indeed a theme, a topic that is very important for us. And the presentation that I'm going to show you is very incoherent, I have to say. So bear with that. It's an experimental analysis. We are not yet fully understanding this topic, but we are very interested by it, and we are using it a lot, indeed, in our competition projects mostly. So basically, I'm going to show you a sequence of research and projects, trying to make the point clear of how can we create a public space, either inside or outdoors or indoors, and how we can kind of connect the program of the building with the city, and therefore generate interesting, inclusive public spaces that provide opportunities for encounters and activities. So I'm going to start here with a very important reference for us. Is the Seagram building of Misva Dero in New York. Most of people know this building, but only recently it came to our attention the gesture that Ms. is doing here. In contrast to most of the high rises in New York that are trying to kind of occupy most of the land and build the maximum square meters, let's say, here Ms. is creating this setback, in a way, kind of creating this public plaza in front of the building, and therefore giving space, giving public space back to the city for activities and encounters to happen. In a similar fashion, in the Fifth Avenue, there was this plaza that has always been problematic to the owner of the building, only for them to team up with Apple earlier in 2004 and kind of create basically create a synergy between retail and public space in creating this what it seems to be one of the most successful retail spaces, even though it is underground and even though it used to be in a site that was not very successful until then. Another reference that is incredible in the sense that it creates this public space of opportunity is Peter Eisenman's memorial in Berlin. It is very remarkable basically here how the city, first of all, decided to dedicate a full urban block in the center of the city for the cause of the memorial. But even more remarkable is the fact that the memorial actually, it is an inhabited memorial. Usually monuments and memorials are so to say inaccessible or are more visual kind of references. In this case, it's actually a terrain in which people walk, hide. They basically engage with the monument in an urban way. This public space in Denmark, in Copenhagen, it's also interesting in the sense that despite its design, so you can argue it's a nice design or not, it actually engages the community by kind of adapting objects and urban furniture from different cultures and putting them together into this very inclusive and socially sensible design of public space. So basically, this is a Skanderberg Square in Tirana, designed by 51E40, a Belgian office that basically transformed what was a very problematic square since the socialist time, a roundabout with heavy traffic. They basically managed to transform it into a kind of carpet of urbanity in a sense. It's a paved area that can allow for events, and it has this light pyramid with water running over it, kind of animating the materiality in the places that it's getting wet. And this is Edi Rama, the former mayor of Tirana, and the politician that heavily supported the project for the Skanderberg Square. And Edi Rama was basically became very famous in his tenure as mayor of Tirana, where in the early 2000s he started painting the facades of the city in vivid colors. And once he started painting the facades in this, he also was an artist himself. So for him was was basically taking his painting work from the canvas into the city itself. But according to him, what happened once he did that was a kind of public discussion in the city. So people basically did not like the colors, they did not like this vivid painting, and they started protesting. But what was important was the fact that they even started to talk about the public space. So even if it was negative feedback, there was a dialogue created, and people started caring about the city. This is Sheikh Ade block here in Rotterdam. It's basically a very interesting urban pocket in the city. It's in the center of the city, but it has always been problematic. It's basically a big parking lot, and in the last years, the synergy between the office Zeus and municipality and other offices have managed to kind of transform this back of house, this inner courtyard, into an activity space. A very important part of the city in terms of nightlife, but also in terms uh, of how you can engage neglected parts of the city and make them receive urban flows and activities. And so basically our office is located in C block in this building on the 5th floor. And as Kai said before, we are a young office focused mainly on competition projects. And by doing competition projects, we have gathered a wide portfolio of public buildings, of which, however, most of the projects are lost, and only few of them have moved on into the next phases. This is a hotel building we are building in collaboration with the office City Foster here in Rotterdam. It's basically a hotel near the city of Durrës. It's a port city, the most historic city in Albania, 20 kilometers from Tirana, and in the wider Riviera of Durrës in the area of Golem. The client had this very interesting site with many pine trees from the which were very popular in the socialist times in Albania, of which we try to preserve as many as possible. But basically, the site, even though it's very close to the beach, it also had kind of a problematic location because it's positioned between the highway and two rows of very generic buildings built during the 90s in Albania with very low quality of architecture. So basically, we thought that the best for the site would be to kind of occupy the most efficient possible site for the building and make the most compact building. And actually, we try to compensate the footprint by creating a roof garden with green on the top floor. In terms of facades, let's say, or in terms of volume, as I said, we did a very compact and efficient volume with very clean lines, and we try to kind of fragment the facade by creating this playful arrangement of the separating walls of the rooms in a way that they can frame and direct the view, but also when you are experiencing the building from the highway, that while you are moving with your car, this facade would kind of create a movement, or would kind of change as you are moving along it. So in this case, we are talking about hospitality, a hotel building, and what we thought is the most important is the interface, or the space between the volume and the facade of the building and the landscape. So through this fragmentation of the facade and breaking down the scale, and by actually cladding these walls in natural stone from all over Albania, we try to engage a bit with in terms of materiality with landscape. Here you can see the different stones from different parts of Albania. There is also Yanina, which is north of Greece, so also in the wider area. And you can see in this image the views towards the sea. And basically what I was talking before, the generic quality of the context buildings, and basically the contrast that this building creates in terms of clarity and the architectural language. And this is a roof garden that I was mentioning before, with a swimming pool, and you can see here the kind of 1 meter placeholder for the soil and the greenery to inhabit it. And this is another hotel we are doing in Albania, again also in collaboration with City Foster. This is actually located in the very important site in the city of Durrës. It's basically at the end of the Lungomare, the waterfront. As you can see, which starts from the port, and then it ends into this area which is called Sphinx. And our collaborator, Cities Foster, in collaboration with Boom Landscape, had already developed the public space in front of our site. This is a building I'm talking about, and this is a public space in front, which actually turned out to be a very successful project, very popular. But what is more important in this setting is basically the sunset. When we visited the site for the first time, we were really amazed by the beautiful sunset that you can experience. And you can see the popularity of this project through to how it has been employed in YouTube videos, and the way that basically the local residents use it. And here you see the other side before we saw the side on the sea, towards the sea. This is the side towards the city, and basically this is our site here during construction of the first floor. And you can see the background of it is also occupied by very mediocre developments of the 90s. But sometimes this background has its own kind of urban aesthetical value, in the sense, and it was you can see here during the construction, this is a fence of our site. It was selected by the famous Albanian rapper Noisy for his video clip of the song named Toto. And basically our idea here was to kind of take advantage of this very beautiful sunset by kind of creating this fragmented facade, which would be mostly glazed and reflect the sunset in different angles, creating this prismatic kind of facade, but also in that sense creating this this interesting by shifting the balconies and having them into this prismatic shape. We would create this interaction, this diagonal visual interaction between the balconies, which is usually not the case in apartment or hotel buildings. So in that case, challenging the convention of the stacked balconies, which keep alienating residents from floor to floor, but then merging them into diagonal connections. So basically, going back to the theme of the public space of opportunities, this is one of the most important references that we like to very often discuss in our team. It's a National Gallery by Mies van der Rohe in Berlin. Basically, what is important for this project is the gesture that Mies again does of accommodating most of the museum rooms and museum functions, exhibition rooms on the basement, underground, and then creating this plaza on the first floor, and then sheltering it by a floating roof. So basically creating like an urban plaza, and then by enclosing it with glass and protecting it from the elements, creating this in between. It's like part of the city, but part of the museum as well. So basically, it's a space, a column-free space that anything can be organized, an event, and any encounter can happen. Another very important project that inspires us in the sense is FAU, the School of Architecture and Urbanism at the University of Sao Paulo. Basically a very brutalist Paulista building that has no front door. It doesn't have a typical entrance. On the contrast, it has these big ramps that kind of accommodate large flows, and then this enormous interior plaza, almost like a part of the city, but then encapsulated inside a building. And Lina Bombardi's museum in Sao Paulo creates a similar kind of potential, but in a completely different architectural way. In this case, let's say Lina Bombardi is basically creating more space than she occupies by designing this building. In a similar fashion, with Ms. Vadero in National Gallery, she is positioning a big part of the functions underground, and then creating this roof space on the first floor that kind of works as a continuation of the city. Only that in this case, she also places exhibition rooms on the first floor. So kind of sheltering the public space, but also using it to accommodate program on top. And even the exhibition room of this museum is unconventional and challenging. Here they are using the exhibits in an unorthodox way by placing them with this plexiglass structure and kind of creating this almost random space in which you meander around the art and experience it in a completely different way from what we are used with the white box, for example. Hermann Herzberger is a very interesting, has designed this office space in Apeldoorn in the 70s, basically celebrating the kind of idea of structuralism that, contrary to the modern movement and contrary to what was until then to the international style, in the sense that was promoting very large generic spaces without character, the structuralists in this case thought that basically architecture can be more participatory, it can be more cozy, let's say, more so basically in this office space, instead of having either a cubicle kind of setup or open plan infinite floors, they basically try to organize the space as small communities, as small rooms that are interconnected, and then smaller groups can kind of work together while diagonal connections and can still happen. And this is also a very interesting project, not very well known, of Le Corbusier for a museum that is organized in this kind of spiral configuration. So in this case, by means of routing, kind of interesting situation is created, even because basically there are you can see there are connections through the corridors. So basically you have a main kind of routing to experience the exhibition, but then in the meantime visual and physical connections give you access to the other corridors, right? This is also a very important moment in architecture, I would say. This is a Sana cultural center in Almere, where basically the idea is expressed of having a ground floor situation without corridors. So basically having the rooms kind of connect directly from one to each other, so that in the one sense you would walk from one situation to the other and experience different cultural moments without having the alienating barrier of the corridor. And talking about corridors and floor plans, this is also a very interesting moment. Frank Gehry's design for the Facebook headquarters, basically the apotheosis of the open plan and the kind of Silicon Valley excitement of working in teams and all these ideas that we know today, that you don't have a fixed workspace, that you work with a laptop, that you are on the move all the time, and that you kind of create this interaction between the workers, that it's fun to work in the office space and it's not like you being alienating. Of course, this typology has had this critique because not everybody can focus and operate in such conditions. But this was not the first time that somebody attempted to take the open plan and give it a more creative dimension. There was in 65 the headquarters of Osram, in which the idea of the office landscape was first kind of introduced and tested. You can see the floor plan here, where basically the suggestion is that you have this big interior slab, interior space, in which the people would be free to kind of position their workstation and the desk without certain limits, and that would then create a more exciting and customizable kind of working space. Another way to create interesting interior kind of urban qualities, what we usually call the interior urbanism or the interior landscape. A landscape not in the sense of greenery or of plants, but landscape in the sense of topography that can kind of create a vertical and diagonal kind of connection inside the buildings. In this case, you can see the Y Factory Tribune by MVRDV, that it's basically creation of some rooms, didactic rooms for the university, but basically also because these rooms would be in this big interior space, creating this tribune for lectures and events. But also when there are no lectures, students would sit and kind of take advantage of this exciting interior space. And we think that in the project of OMA, in the Axel Springer in Berlin, this kind of theme was further explored, in the sense that when they started designing the project, they realized that office space is more and more becoming informal and interactive, and there is less and less formal office. So basically, they tried here to kind of create this big void inside, around which they would have all the informal working spaces, which they don't need so much quiet space. They need more exciting space for interaction and meetings. And this is our project for the Varna Library in Bulgaria, which we won a few years ago, in which we in a similar way we try to create an interior space that is special, in the sense that it connects to the city and that it creates an interesting space for encounters. So the site for this project was in the center of the city of Varna, next to the this socialist building, which shelters the city hall, and in front of this big boulevard. And basically, in trying to kind of design a modern library building, we really like to visit older examples, and of course the example of the Boulez Library in Paris was the one that captured our attention, in the sense that basically what Boulez is doing here is creating this very big interior space, empty space, and kind of creating the sense of an agora. So the library, the books of the library are organized around in this stepped kind of configuration, and in the middle there is this empty space for people to kind of exchange ideas and knowledge. Of course, this image is processed. We kind of created some openings, as if this would be in our site, and then you can see here the city hall tower that I showed before. And so we started playing with these images to see how could we, in our case, create kind of similar situations. And here you see a fragment of the image where basically visitors, let's say, are interacting with the books, but also with each other through this kind of stepped situation. And this is a collage we did early on, trying to investigate the potential of this direction. And so basically, we imagined of organizing the library in a kind of stepped configuration, with most of the books being kind of occupying this site, and then also expressing, let's say, the use of the building. And on the other side, then we would have the inverted kind of configuration with the archive, and then the ground floor would be just a continuation of the city into the building, and then you would always at all times have a view to the city hall and the context. So basically, in working on that direction, we thought that most of the public functions, such as the learning center, the auditorium, the cafe, the exhibition space, would be on the ground floor to be completely accessible from the city, and then most of the library uses would be on the upper floors. And then basically we would create an atrium, a typical atrium in public buildings such as libraries, that would bring sunlight and kind of connect with the city, as I said, but then with the only exception of shifting this atrium on every floor to create this this interior urbanism that I mentioned before, or interior landscape. Then we would also make this kind of entrance of the city into the library as a kind of diagonal continuation, right? That takes you on the top floor where there is a lot of light from the skylight, and basically in a symbolical way creating a transition from urbanity to knowledge. You can see here the section and how this stepping functions. In the end, we did not put the archive on the front part. We actually positioned it as a backbone on the north side, on the back, and basically created these three conditions: the kind of open and noisy and interactive atrium space. Then on this side there is a kind of quiet and almost monastic library function, and then on the front side there is a semi-transparent, semi-quiet part of the library as well. So you can see it here, the diagonal void, the two parts, the quiet and the semi-quiet, the backbone with the archive, the offices of the librarians on the north side, and then a pavilion on top for activities and informal events. And basically the way that this project works is as a urban podium, almost like an overscaled urban furniture, or like a man-made mountain, and then you see how it actually works through the city. We also positioned these very big ramps on the first two floors to kind of receive the flows of the city, and then you would basically jump from one floor to the other each time with a different kind of stair. In this case, for example, we position this amphitheatric stair where actually small gatherings could also happen. And it became clear to us also when we were working on the next phases of this after we won the competition, that basically this is a definition of the public space of encounters, with so many different uses, complementary to the library, such as Mediatek and learning centers. That it's all about encounters, events, and knowledge sharing. Here you see the working model image of the lobby and the ramps, how they receive the flows. And here you see the kind of diagonal connections that are created in the void through these shifted kind of floor plans. And the bridges that basically connect the two parts through the void, but also kind of serve to transfer all the installations from the one part of the floor plan to the other. This is a image of the Mediatek. There is a performance space that we actually use curtains to kind of separate it into different configurations. And then the top floor, the fifth floor of the void, is basically organized as urban lounge, because on this floor you can actually, it's the only place where you can borrow the books of the archive and read them. So basically people would stay long hours for long during the day to kind of so basically we organized as a lounge that can provide for that. And then on the fifth floor there is also a kind of auditorium, kind of podium stairs that takes into the pavilion, another spot where small gatherings and events could happen. And then on the last floor of the pavilion, basically it's a very flexible space for events to happen, or workshops, or all kind of. So basically another project that we try to work with this theme is the Space Salim Women Facility in Seoul. Basically a very difficult site near the center of Seoul. Basically, the client has already this building where they are treating women and families that have problems, family problems, and then they are trying to integrate them back into society by means of creating jobs inside the foundation. And then the creators would also sell and communicate their work in this building. So basically they wanted to extend into this site. So you see that the program was mainly focused on learning spaces, workshops, family spaces. So very, very strong social kind of aspect on the program. And then we were trying to kind of understand and see which kind of typology would better fit this kind of sensitive and sensible program. So what we did is basically propose this very simple box, very simple shape, which we started basically perforating. Here you see we create a big event space and basically a connection between the train station that was on this site and the existing woman facility building. And then we kind of open it up on the ground floor towards the site. And then we basically extract this large part of the interior to create this kind of pixelated stepped interior that would create then these diagonal connections, visual and physical connections. And in a sense, you see how basically the whole interior of the building becomes almost like an urban room, which is opening up towards the neighboring building, and therefore creating a relation between the two. And so basically the way that we would organize this building was to have all the generic program, which is the rooms, the hotel rooms on the one side, kind of framing this event space in the middle. And then on the other side, on the kind of podium that we created, we put all the workshop spaces inside. And then each workshop space would also have this terrace to kind of exhibit and communicate the production. And so basically visitors would jump from the one terrace to the other and talk with the people that work there and create a kind of engagement between them. But at the same time, kind of creating this interior urban room that can be can host a series of large scale events and happenings. But basically, the bigger question today is what's going on with our cities and what's going on with the world at large. And of course, everybody knows this diagram. It's been a while since basically the urban population has exceeded the one of the rural. So nowadays, more people live in the cities than outside of the cities. And therefore, it becomes kind of apparent that the notion of urbanity is becoming more and more important. And basically the question of how do we understand the city, right? How do we understand urbanity is not a simple analysis, it's a very complex one, as complex as our society itself. And so we are very, we like a lot the notion of urbanity, obviously, it's also in the name of our office. But while working, researching, we actually noticed that it has been a notion that was very popular in the pre-industrial era and that has been declining more and more through the centuries. There is a small increase here where our office is funded. But at the same time, paradoxically, the notion of the urban has not been used or mentioned, and it has kind of increased, let's say, post-industrial, in the post-industrial era. And so the question kind of raises why has that happened and what does it mean? So in our understanding, basically it means that cities have been only growing since the Industrial Revolution to the point that they have become uncontrollable enormous entities, and therefore the notion of urbanity, which would be like understanding the city as a total, cannot be applied anymore, and it's more about talking about smaller pieces of the city. And therefore the notion of the urban is more useful. Very often we talk about urban intervention, urban renewal, urban regeneration. So today we are more and more thinking about the city as an assembly of smaller parts rather than a total entity, a total organism. So we are very interested in kind of bringing back this idea of understanding the city as a totality. But basically, if we would be to dive a bit into what happened in the last decades that has led into this kind of understanding of the city. Well, there was a time in Paris in May '68 where basically the young generation kind of protested heavily against the previous generations, but also they also saw the city as something unwanted, something that was imposed by others into them and that didn't express their intentions and their ambitions. And I find it very interesting. One of the slogans of those protests, which was that the beach lies beneath the paving stone. So basically, the city in that case becomes a dystopia that is limiting, let's say, the ambitions of the subject of the city. A very interesting moment was also the autonomist protest in Italy in the '70s, where basically one of the dimensions of those protests was the refusal of the workers to go to the factory to work, because they would say that they would claim that basically the industrial work in the factory was a very alienating very alienating job that could be very well automated. So basically people have so many talents, so many dreams and ambitions, and then in the factory you just have to repeat the same function every day for the rest of your life. And that's a breaking moment in history, in the sense that uh, technology kind of allowed us and would allow us for more, let's say, for more space to express our talents as humans and as creatives. And in the 70s, there was also the demolition of the St. Louis Proud Igu housing that would, by many, and specifically by Charles Jenks, be labeled as the end of modernism, only to be followed by in the 80s by the outbreak of postmodernism, and basically kind of turn into architecture and the way that you understand the city, that is today heavily criticized and raised many doubts about the value and the contribution of architecture. This is one of the early projects of Kengo Kuma. Very interesting kind of start of the career of one of the most important architects, in my opinion, nowadays. And of course, when I was born, in '89, the world was to change a lot. It coincided with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and basically, I come from Albania, a former socialist country. Also, there, socialism in Europe would kind of fall all over Europe in one way or the other, and basically, a new reality would kind of unfold for the European cities. And then in 2001, there were the massive protests of Genoa, which were heavily kind of linked to the anti-globalization movement, kind of suggesting that in the modern world of globalization, the few bigger countries get to decide for all the other smaller ones, and so I find it very interesting in the sense that how do we understand our society, let's say, in our cities in this context of a global empire, let's say. And of course, the introduction of the iPhone in 2007 was a very important moment in kind of changing the interface, how we interface with the city, and how we kind of communicate with each other. And in 2011, there was a moment in which, in my opinion, the star architecture started to decline. This is a proposal of MVRDV for Twin Towers in Seoul, kind of suggesting that the star architects that once kind of inspired us have turned into, let's say, dubious kind of global ambassadors of maybe the wrong statements. And this is Frank Gehry in 2014, kind of denouncing most of the architectural production in the world being as inferior to what architecture can actually really offer. And this is another interesting moment, 2015. SpaceX kind of for the first time reusing a rocket. It basically opening up the new possibilities for the space exploration. So if rockets are to be reused and recycled as airplanes are basically reused, that would mean that traveling to space would be very cheap, and therefore the kind of colonization of space and other planets could become a reality. And talking of architecture, a while ago, I think another important moment was the last few years, where in this case Alejandro Aravena, somebody who has been very famous for his social work with the incremental housing of Elemental in Chile, got and the same year organized the Biennale in Venice, but also got the Pritzker Prize, kind of suggesting that basically the biggest honor in architecture would not be a privilege of the architecture anymore, but could open up to new realities in architecture. And of course, we are still living the kind of limits and the shock of the pandemic, which basically kind of limited or kind of attacked the very foundation of the Western world, which is the cities itself and urbanity. So now what we're experiencing is kind of lack with the lockdown. Basically, I think more and more we're trying to live with it and open up our cities again. But basically, during the lockdown, the city and everything associated with it paused to exist. However, in Greece and in many parts of the world, we saw many interesting social distancing protests. This is one in during the annual Labor Day in Athens, where despite the pandemic, despite the limitations, people can still express they can still protest and still hope that they can ask for a new society, let's say. And interesting way to understand our, let's say, contemporary world are the books of David Harvey, one of my favorite urban geographer. Harvey, in '89, he wrote this very interesting book about the condition of the postmodernity, not only in architecture, but in the society at large. Basically, postmodernity, among other kind of important notions, was also the decline of the big ideas of the past, right? So socialism, communism, capitalism, all these big ideas would basically not fit in the new world where the individuality would be important. So it's but basically it's also kind of closely connected with the notion of neoliberalism, which kind of suggests that more and more since the 70s, the governments and the governments are shrinking, and the private sector is increasing. So basically, we are going from the public to the private, and that's also a consequence why the big ideas would be kind of thing of the past, because there would not be one government or one regime that could impose ideas, but basically would go into more fragmented kind of world where many ideas, when smaller ideas would kind of emerge. But basically, the question appears: how critical can we be in the future if most of the world would be to be private? And this is the kind of reality of the factory 100 years ago and today. So basically, automation has taken over most of the alienating, repetitive jobs of the factory, and now people, let's say, the creative subject of the city can be more creative to kind of unfold its talent and have more time for creative work. Similarly, the office space has changed a lot. It has moved from a tailorist kind of approach of very extended kind of floor plans of repetitive workstations into more kind of creative social configurations. And basically our understanding of the world for many decades or centuries was that basically the proletariat works in the factory and creates industrial production, and then this is where they organize, and when they kind of create the revolts and the demand changes in society. However, nowadays there has been different interpretations of that trinity. One example is Tony Negri and Michael Hart, through their books Empire, Multitude, and Commonwealth. They have actually reinterpreted this trinity, saying that basically not the proletariat but the multitude, a notion that has also been analyzed by Paulo Virno and other philosophers as a subject of today's world. So basically the creative kind of people that don't work in the factory anymore, they work in the services sector, they work online from home, they work basically in the metropolis itself, in the city itself, and they produce immaterial production. So not industrial good necessarily, but services, relations, affections, language. That is not to say that there are no factories today, or that there are no industrial workers, but that the biggest part of the society, it's not. It's actually the workforce that operates within the city itself. And so the way to understand the world today is to say that the metropolis is to the multitude what the factory was to the industrial working class, a site of a material production. And this is a very important statement for the city because it places the contemporary city in the heart of all developments. And then the question would be like, how do we engage with the city based on this understanding? How do we create buildings and urban planning? I'm going to show you some last projects. So this is another take on the idea of creating a public space on opportunity. This is a competition we did recently in Gwangju for a library and the cultural complex. So this is the city of Gwangju. Basically, in the center of the city, adjacent to the river, there is this site. This is our site here. And on the one side, there is a technological park. On the other side, there is the river. And then on this side, there is the city hall and the city center, let's say. And so basically in this big site, what there is today, it is a kind of recycle facility, a factory that only serves for 15 years, and now the city wants to transform it into a cultural center and basically transform the whole site into a cultural site with a new library and public functions. A very big site, as you can see, that could fit many cultural buildings that we like. And so basically what we thought was to kind of create a kind of a Pandora box. So how could we basically position a new building and bind it with the existing factory and then connect it with all the sites? So our idea was to kind of position a plaza, a square in the middle that kind of connects the entrance areas, the cultural center, so the former factory, and the new building of the library and the park. So a kind of place, open air place that brings together these different uses. So by positioning this plaza and the library on the one side of it, we then thought that we could kind of lift every floor of the library and create this continuous routing to create a more dynamic interior landscape, as we said before, but in this case a bit more radical and a bit more exciting. And then we kind of positioned a backbone on the north side of it, where the back of house would be, and most of the circulation flows, elevators. And then in between the floors, we would put these event spaces. And then we would create a plaza on the other side and the connection that runs through the site, and that basically connects the whole facility with the river. And here you see the result of the interior kind of configuration of the library, the public space of fluidity in that sense. It's a place that creates all sorts of connections, but also a kind of dynamic approach into how the libraries of the future could be, right? So the libraries of the future are not all about books anymore. Books will always be there, but are not the main kind of source of information and knowledge. It's more about technology and the human factor that basically can flourish in such kind of interior space. And here you see the overview of the interior urbanism, as we call it. And this is one of the in-between spaces, one of the event spaces, which kind of creates, it's part of this total, let's say, inclusiveness. While you're held in an event, you can see what's happening in the library, in the other spaces of the building, and then feel as part of a total kind of cultural situation. And this is the plaza towards the river. So basically, by creating this kind of escalating section, we also create this grotto, this entrance area on the side of the river, which can open up the facade completely and create events by merging the inside and the outside. And this is a cultural center in Warsaw. A completely different type of assignment. Basically, in this project, by the way, you can see here the city of Warsaw, one of the most interesting cities in Europe, in the sense that it was completely destroyed during the Second World War, and it was rebuilt in a completely different way. Whereas it was before, it was a very dense kind of European city. After the destruction of the Second World War and the reconstruction by the socialist regime, it basically obtained a completely new layout, a very modernistic approach to the city with massive housing blocks and less density, let's say, on the horizontal level. So the site was very close to the Palace of Culture, to the center in Warsaw, and was basically located inside an urban block, so without any expression on the facade. And basically the task was to create a cultural center that would house 3 cultural institutions into one. So there was so these 3 cultural institutions, one of them was performative, the other one was for children, and they all have a lot of artistic workshops and interesting kind of program that should be combined into one. Of course, in our mind, there should always be like this kind of interesting and creative way to combine them, but by kind of allowing them their autonomy to function, but also creating this synergy between them so that they can exchange ideas and basically interact with each other. So these are our attempts to kind of find a typology that would do that. And of course, I think this is also the most exciting moment of a project, when you kind of try to make this work, but in a sense, we kind of tended towards having a kind of autonomy for each one. So basically, we positioned one of the institutions, the one with the children, on the ground floor in the plinth, and then we positioned the second institution, which had a big theater on the upper floors, and then on the one corner of it we positioned the other one. And so then basically it would be like an interlocking of the 3 institutions into one sculptural building, which then we would try to create this big atrium inside, and a big passage from the ground floor. So through the ground floor you are entering to this atrium, and then you are experiencing the 3 institutions together. And then by positioning this circular kind of routing, you could connect them through. And then I would put the vertical circulation on the north side to kind of protect it from the elements on that side. So here you can see how they interlock, and basically the plinth becomes an opportunity with these staircases as a second entrance that is fluid to the city. And this is the main entrance area, where you basically start from a kind of simple entrance lobby, and then you find yourself into the big atrium, which is animated by the workshop spaces and the functions of each institution. And so basically here they would come together, and they would we would create this kind of common place. Last one, I would like to show a kind of application of this theme into a public space. So basically this is a competition project that we did for the Central Square in Warsaw. It's called the Plaza Fiat. It's basically in the very heart of Warsaw. There is the Palace of Culture, a very impressive, important building. And this is the kind of projection with how the city is planning to kind of densify the area around it. So this is a palace of culture built in the 50s. Basically, in that period of time, as many would know, there was the kind of Stalinist approach in architecture. So in the beginning of the socialist regime in Soviet Union, there was all this exciting decades of Russian avant-garde in architecture and in art, like a very impressive period of innovation, only for Stalin to kind of suggest a new direction later on, where basically classicist architecture and references would become the language of the Soviet regime. That would change later in the 60s after Stalin would be denounced by the socialist regime in the Soviet Union, and then they would go back into modern architecture, being the kind of visual language of the regime. But in this period, this palace was built as a palace of culture and science, and became basically the landmark of the reconstruction of Warsaw. A project that nowadays is being both kind of admired and hated. So there's a big debate around it, if it should be preserved or demolished. But basically, what is important is that there is a very big park, generic park around it, and then in the center of the city, there is a very loose kind of situation that doesn't provide for urbanity, let's say. But basically, this square in front of the palace, the central square, was mostly used for parades and for kind of military and events where the regime would kind of express its power. That's why it has also been like a very loose open space without much character and proportions. And what we thought is that we could change that. So nowadays, instead of having a very loose open space without character, we would basically make the opposite. We would propose a square that has a lot of character and that is basically bringing the city together. So we would basically kind of identify patterns and uses and materials from the whole city and kind of create a kind of patchwork in the square. These were the kind of main attributes of the square in the new master plan. So they are planning to make this theater here, the kind of art museum, and another development. So there is the idea already to kind of frame the main square and then have it connected with the main arteries of the city. So then in that context, we thought that we could celebrate arts and theater and events and create a kind of inclusive patchwork for all residents of Warsaw to kind of be invited to use it. And so then we kind of split the square into different moments. So there is on this part there is the theater square that kind of works for the theater to open up on the outdoors. Then there is a central empty space. There is the monument that there is already on the site where the officials used to stand during the parades. So there is a kind of monument plaza here, and then there is a market, children area, a playground, and a space for the art institution to function. So basically, of course, this could change in the next phases. This could be further discussed with the city and program it in a more specific way for the city. But basically, the idea was to turn a generic open space into a very specific patchwork of activities. So basically, the public space of inclusiveness. In this image, we deliberately kind of focused the Palace of Culture, the Palace of Culture and Sciences to kind of emphasize, to kind of give the statement that basically the public space should be more important and more readable than basically the monuments of the past, right? And here you see the different moments that emerge through this kind of design. And of course would then borrow materials and techniques from all over the city and kind of put them together. and then it could be also kind of engaged with the surrounding buildings and operate with them in special events. Of course, it would also be a very generic background for different events to happen, of course, because this is none of these pockets is so important that you cannot kind of intervene into it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Think it's really comprehensive presentation. Think is any people has question for? Is any people has questions? Okay. Okay.
I
They
think
have a
we can write
one.
in the chat, right? Yes, perfect.
Yeah, he writes in the chat. Yeah.
I'll bring it here.
Religion adapted the people's diversity. What do you think about that? Yeah, it's about the corona pandemic things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah. So the. I think on the one side, as I said in the presentation, like the kind of social distancing has on the first understanding has kind of ruined our cities, right? Like everything that is amazing for our cities, like density, events, flexibility, all these notions are temporarily frozen and paused. However, I think there has been a push into our society to change, right? So if we say that this is temporary and hopefully it will be, it kind of put us in a position to work from home, to kind of actually really use the tools that have been there for a while, like working, telecommunication, etc. And I think it's also a challenge for us to sort of create new possibilities, right? So for example, like people that spend the lockdown in the landscape, in the countryside, were the ones to profit the most, because then they would have a really nice setting and they could have more space to kind of walk and so I think it's if we see it as a temporary moment, there are positive sides into society at large. But in the long term, I think the city is maybe the biggest victim, except of human losses, of course. And then I think if that would be to last longer, we should very critically kind of try to 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 combine the typical functions of the city within the social distancing regime, let's say.
Yeah, I think probably you could have a new design for a public off pandemic, or this could be a proposal for your future project. You could have some examples you can show to continue this topic if the current situation is like this. But I have one thing mentioned is for students to understand the future processing of future if you keep doing researching architecture or they have a dramatic difference between the processing between China and the Europe, this kind of in terms of architecture, because what we educated in China, sometimes we call it producing, or we keep to make a most efficient architecture, not architecture, but the buildings. But in Europe, this kind of education be processing even longer, which is combined with a much more research topic and a much more personal perspective, personal opinions merged with the presentation, with the design. So they have a strong characterized things inside of this kind of knowledge. So that's a huge difference between education between China and the Europe. So that's also the way going to learning for the futures. If you are in if you are studying abroad, or you are aiming to do that, it's a good example for you guys to how to from research an approach to the design, including a perspective at the beginning. So that's the most things we want to see in your design. It's not only according to the pressure of the speed, or according to uh, normally it's not about you searching some image and show me and say, okay, I want to design like that. That's not works. So the design is much comprehensive thinking.
I think that's a very interesting topic, Kai.
Yeah,
I remember there is this anecdote of when, for example, Rem Koolhaas went for the first time to teach in Harvard in the early
yeah.
90s.
Mm-hmm.
What they were trying to, he says, what they were trying to teach the students at that point in the States was how do you transform decaying harbors, so harbors that used to be very active, but now they in the West they have been for different reasons abandoned. How do you transform them into, I don't know, into urban into parts of the city? And basically that was very, he says that was very very uninteresting to Chinese students, because at that time and still today most of the harbors in China were booming, and
Yeah,
suddenly they were
yeah.
asked to think about declining. So I think the big difference between China and Europe is that there have been so much development in China from the 70s on, so many
Yeah.
new cities being created. So in that sense, so much work to be done fast, and that's not unique to China. There have been also different contexts that have experienced that. Also, let's say the former socialist countries in Europe, they had in the 90s those moments where they suddenly had to kind of prepare very quickly for a new kind of urban paradigm. So they had to extend their cities, provide housing, etc. And so that in that moment, I think the moment suggests that you should be educated as an architect to be faster and more efficient, as you said, and kind of respond to that specific moment. Whereas in Europe, most of the European cities are so old and so saturated and so slow in developing everything. So basically, when you have to do a project, there are so many voices and opinions and stakeholders that have to contribute and agree. And
Yeah,
sometimes projects are even overthought or overdesigned
yeah,
in that sense.
yeah.
So yeah,
That's also, yeah, it's also according to we call it the civilization, because this kind of level of civilization we could see a little bit booming um, in China in terms of perspective, but this kind of civilization in Europe is spread and wider, much more into different level of processing of architecture. So that's why they have a utopian this kind of office can much more focus on create idea, create a story, create a methodology.
yeah, I think
Then they have another terms of engineering or construction can cooperate together. But that this kind of thing is lacked in China. From my point of view, they have a gap in the kind of transition. I think also
yeah,
probably
but on
also.
the other side, I think China has in the last decade, let's say, or I mean, gradually
Mm,
becoming is turning more and more into quality, and is more and more
yeah,
able to
yeah,
produce amazing Chinese professionals on every aspect, right? So
yeah,
I
yeah,
think there used to be that China was trying to copy and borrow, and it had all this production capacity, but not so much expertise on all fields, especially in industrial production. And so that used to be the case for a while, but I think today it's catching up, and it's even going ahead of the West in technology, in production, in everything. And we see some amazing architects and some amazing architecture resonating from China, to the degree that it cannot be happened in Europe, because in Europe you are in this kind of stagnated, low speed mode that innovation and exceptional architecture, it's very difficult to emerge. Where in China you see that there are a lot of fresh minds and fresh expertise that is far ahead.
Yeah, actually, from my point of view, my experience in Netherlands and in Shanghai, these few years, I'm feeling is an interesting moment in China to doing architecture because they this kind of perspective is getting they're getting changed, and and this kind of young clients, they're going to change quickly, and it become much easy to do conversation with to serve for the young client compared with much conventional clients. So so in this kind of discussion, in the processing of the discussions, we save a lot of time to aiming for a good solution for some project. So because Europe have their own speed, they keep it. Even they can keep it much more slowly. But in China, still they still want to see the speed, but in terms of the speed, they also want to see the quality. So this kind of quality is getting to be tremendous change. Then this kind of quantity plus qualities is booming in this moment. So you see in the website, like if you see some award price at 50% or 60%, how to say, applications from China. So it's a super interesting data. I see this kind of, and they have few selected, and be really interesting. Can be comparison between Chinese the project between China and the world, and this kind of situation also make much more Chinese architect thinking. Do we losing our traditional things, or we combine it like Japanese? So it's also a really strange moment for me. Is like a super mixed. This kind of globalization makes Chinese architects super mixed. So they, even myself is confused to be which way of thinking, because if you think too much public things in China still doesn't work in the ideology. So to present this kind of public space, like CCTV cannot be public, or Tianjin Library cannot be public. So this kind of public ideology is super works for European city, but it will be to be another way translate into China, and without any conflicting ideologies. So that's in some ways is quite tricky, but it's not easy actually. Especially if you deal with the government project. Probably you have experience of working for Chinese project with MIV. You have this kind of this kind of thinking actually. But it's really interesting. It also depends on city. We have so many different cities actually. They have super open, the city are open, but they have a lot of cities super conventional. But let's see the new questions. They have more, this kind of things.
I mean, from a European perspective, plays a big role, public participation. I mean, I think Europe has experienced a lot of failed projects. a lot of projects, especially for public space, that it didn't work, and you know, of course, very often there were also here kind of political ambitions of individual politicians to make a specific projects in their kind of, that would kind of represent their political agenda, and then the next politician would cancel them, or would soon they would turn out to be not functioning. So I think on the one hand, today in Europe, public participation is even expected. Let's say, like cities or clients, they want to get the public feedback, to not kind of go back and forth with decisions that would not work. But yeah, talking, I'm not so familiar with the context in China. I've done some
Uh,
projects there, of
I,
course, but
I,
I think also China is, I don't know, sometimes clients or governments nowadays can surprise us positively. Like I think uh, the government in China, when it comes to the public space, is trying to bring innovation, and but of course, yeah, I'm not sure how public participation is how does it work in the process, but I'm sure that there is a certain amount of public feedback in the government in China when it comes to the design of public spaces. But I think it's also this mix that we said before, right? That in China they want projects to be done very fast, and sometimes public participation can be a very slow and complex process until you have all the stakeholders kind of agree and express themselves. So, of course, I think public participation is the future. Since the 70s, as we saw with the example of structuralism. Um, I don't know. I think at certain point you also have to weigh the priorities. Do you want to be effective and kind of intervene into the very fastly growing Chinese cities, and kind of be proactively kind of creating nice public spaces as much as you can, or do you want to be slower and do fewer, maybe fewer interventions in the city that are more well done, but that they are not expressing the size of the city, right? So I'm not sure there. Of course, I'm in favor of public participation in any case, but I'm also in favor of being uh, of governments kind of being able to catch up with the growth of their cities, and therefore not having areas of the cities that are completely neglected because they never had the time or the resources to kind of uh, address those areas, right? So maybe Kai, you can.
uh, yeah, I think because this word is come from Western, so this kind of public behavior is always linked with civil rights. But almost they have a different range or level of civil rights in different countries. So uh, not only in China have a lot of failed public space, but even Europe they have or even have a lot of failed public space. So but in China, if we want to translate this public space into our traditional thinking, that's what I first say. We don't do too much ideology conflicting. We need to follow the capitalism thinking introduced for government to sell this kind of public um, sense. I mean, that could be much more interesting. Could be introduced in China. It's not um, because this kind of behavior is always um, uh, you always have a witness for your behaviors in this public space. So you can introduce this sense science if you they cannot be totally translated into the real public domain. From my point of view, if they have a huge ideology change, but probably understand me not so clearly, but they have some gaps in between. That's how I want to say it. But it should be translated into another way to be embedded in China. From my point of view, it should be like that. It's not a it's not super difficult actually. But this kind of ways it should be translated into profit. You say, yeah. Then that would be if you have one example be successful. This kind of Chinese, not only Chinese, but the social media be broadcast, and then other the real estate developers, they will see it. Okay, that works. Now we do the same. So could be much more effective. But not in ideology. Yeah, it's different. I have this kind of experience to be because we, for example, in this kind of library, MLV design in Tianjin, especially for book actually, but because we have a really special regulation for the fire protect, so this kind of all the book be deleted, and then they embedded this kind of fake book into the the shelf. So that's actually the meaning of public space is gone from my point. But they have much more people go there because this kind of space become charming or become attractive.
Mm-hmm. Shall we maybe invite Yoni? Yoni, do you hear us? Are you
Hello.
there? Yeah, so
Yes.
Yoni Asila from Studio UI is a colleague of mine, a friend of mine.
Oh yeah.
He's an expert in urban planning and urban strategy. So I don't know, Yoni, if you want to contribute into the discussion, like how does urban participation in Europe and in China, kind of how important it is, and how, I know how you also been in China, right? In workshop there, so maybe you.
I've been in China twice, actually. In Wuhan, it's kind of name to not say these days, but I was there last year for a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
It was organized from the Department of Urbanism in Wuhan, and from my experience, what I saw is that China is slowly trying, let's say, to develop itself into more the public voice. So the public voice, it's not the follower, but it's actually, let's say, a tool that the government and the public planning organizations take into the consideration now more than ever. For example, there was this really old market in the center of Wuhan, and the big megalomaniac developers, they wanted to build their 30 or 50 floor volume buildings. So the discussion is going on now for 10 years or 15 years because those small salesmen, they really are insisting that this is a place of character, of it has a sense of place, and that if you take this, then everything will be the same. And that is now actually what I see also in other projects, whereas, as Jürgen said, that more and more experts from Europe are stepping in the Chinese market with the knowledge and let's say of the eye of the micro urbanism, because it is a matter of fact that the scale in China and the scales in Europe are completely different. So what has been developed in Europe in terms of urban space, public space, and participation it always has been in the micro scale, however that big is. Because in terms of China, something like that, it's almost, you cannot even imagine it. How can that work? Because if, for example, for a workshop, you invite your neighborhood to participate in Europe, or at least in the Netherlands, where I've been working from the last 5 years, they will show up 30 or 50 people. If something like that happened in China, where there is a, let's say, neighborhood workshop, I'm sure that there will be 200 people. So what does that mean for the neighborhood? What does that mean for the project itself? And yeah, in terms of participation, I think that is slowly changing in China. Projects are, I think, being more open, even though, as we said, they are basically driven from the government, which in a way it's not that bad, because also the best, what I see at least, the best project in Europe are driven by municipalities, are driven by constitutions, are driven by the government. Whereas the ones driven by rich developers, or let's say developers that really have big views for areas, there you see the lack of quality and the lack of participation as well. Like, there are projects that in 15 or 20 years they become old, and that is one of the cases also that Europe, the same time as Asia, but talking about China as well, is trying to avoid.
So there is a kind of process of maturity in a sense, right? Like I think the government, once they, or the market as well, once they kind of accommodate the need to new housing or to new developments, then eventually they will start slowing down and investing more into quality, right?
I believe so, because the great development in China happened 30 or 50 years ago, at least when they started. So you see now that there is decay of that wave, because all of that cheap construction at some point now they have to be renewed, and therefore the market will not change. So it'll be more about quality, about maintenance, about as I said, micro architecture, micro urbanism, and it's not about the big scale anymore.
It's also there is more consolidated middle class, right, in China. So middle class would also always ask for more quality, right, or more, we have more potential to kind of imagine and facilitate quality. So in that sense, I think it's almost inevitable that there will be that switch.
Certainly, but you can also see it. I also graduated from TU Delft, and the number of Chinese students that go there for a master or for some specialization, it's amazing. It's amazing, because they need that expertise, and you see that in the school, you see that in the books that they study, you see that in the way that they think about their cities. And of course, that will take some time to see the changes in the Chinese cities. But you see that this new blood of designers, they are really trying to make some change, to make some pockets of a different way of dealing with things.
Yes. And currently they have a amount of students, they study abroad and they come back to China. They they also personally searching for the way how to engage in this society, because they have everybody is different, actually. Yeah. And it's because now the project that you get from China, you can, long time ago you only get from real estate. Okay, currently they have so many generations like a middle class. They want to be like shop design or interior or private house. Have a lot. So this kind of project is getting much more personalized and much more interesting than before. Just like a repeating, like a bigger real estate. Like Shanghai, they have no land for them to build. So much more project is for a renovation project.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's much more space now for the designers. You call it architect, you call it urban designer or interior landscape also, but there is much more space now for regeneration, much
Yeah.
more space and for ideas of how we deal with the problem that was actually created only the last 30 or 50 years. Huh? It's not an
Yeah.
old problem. It's not something that we are dealing with in Europe. Like
Yeah.
if you want to build something new, you have to
Yeah.
investigate what happened 2,000 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
True.
problem in
Yeah.
China, and that is also the beauty of it, that the problem in China is so new that and where the theories were also experimental, and the urban regeneration and construction was mainly to solve only one problem. But you see now with mainly with Corona, but also with the let's say fourth industrialization uh, of the digital, let's say, world, is that it's not only one dimension now. The problem it's about verticality, it's about space, it's about the views, it's about conditions of living, conditions of being outside, conditions of meeting, things like this that always have been in the agendas of the planners and of the architects, but when let's say it's simple, when your client says, okay, I need a building for 200 people, it's that also really makes the architect or the designer really let's say it restricts its freedom in imagination, in ideas, in creativity, and that is something that we I think that we will see the next 20 or 30 years that will happen in China.
Yes. True. Yeah.
I'm also actually very excited for China doing that well in the global, let's say, market, in the global kind of standing, because I think like Chinese, the way that I see them and I experience them here in Europe, have a completely different kind of ethical code than the Europeans, in a good way. Like I think the Chinese are genuine patriots in contrast to Europeans, because when most of Europeans go abroad to study, they are thinking that they will go and they will never come back. That's what they are aiming for. They're trying to escape their country, whereas the Chinese somehow they are thinking, how can I go to study where to get experience and knowledge, and then come back to bring it in my country, and the government is heavily kind of facilitating that, as far as I'm concerned, by helping students to go and then relocate. And of course the market allows it, because you go back and then most probably you will find a very good job in your country. And I find that a very exciting moment in which we were not used here in Europe. Here in Europe, you go and then you hardly ever come back unless you really have to. And in Europe, our ethical kind of codes, values are really not very productive in terms of countries. Like, we are usually nationalists in a very bad way, in a very uninteresting way, and in a very damaging way for the society, in a sense. It's very difficult to find real patriotism, let's say, in Europe. You usually find superficial nationalism. I think that's very important for China.
Yeah, because we are far away from Europe. The European Union is a group. with countries maybe the same. but it's true actually that yeah, a lot is come back. Because the practice probably that's what I say. They still have the quantity there, so they have so many things happen. So for them, if they do want to do practice, probably China is also another moment. Maybe the only moment. I'm not sure of the future, but maybe the future is good. But this moment is interesting for the architect.
I can give you one example. For example, during the crisis in 2008, it's an ongoing crisis actually, if you consider the pandemic, in Greece, where me and Yoni studied and grew up. Actually, a very strange phenomenon happened while in the middle of a crisis, like the construction sector was completely inactive, nothing was being built. Because of the financial situation, then the schools of architecture almost doubled or tripled their amount of students that they will accept. So where a more dystopian future would appear ahead, more universities in Greece would produce more architects. And recently, in the last few years, they also opened 2 new schools of architecture. And that, I mean, that what would you think about that? Like, whereas there is no construction, hardly any serious construction going on in Greece, the country is producing more and more architects. In my opinion, that kind of means that that graduates are basically becoming some sort of exportable. You know, we are producing architects so that we can send them abroad. And that's a bit, there is some irony and some peculiar kind of dimensions to that. Like, why would you produce more architects where there is no architecture going on in your country? Why you would not maybe focus on other areas? And sometimes, you know, like, it's not good for the country in the sense that it pays for the students to study and to graduate and to get the best possible professionals, and then other countries kind of exploit their expertise for free, let's say. Like, they will not invest on their development until that point, and then the country will not really try to bring them back, because it has already many of them. So I don't know, that's also an interesting point of view.
Yeah, the study architecture in China is getting reduced because when I studied 2004 until 2010 is everybody can build a house, or anybody can. There's so many land you can build whatever, but now is getting the quality, the quantity is reduced. Of the student who want to study architecture in China, I think because the salary is not higher in China anymore actually. So according to the future, they change the topic. That's also, I don't know, this things you mentioned in Greece is 2008 is getting increased even according to the market. They don't require so many architects. But in Italy also, right? There's so many architects.
Yeah.
I forgot who did. Maybe OMA did this research. Italy has like 10 person has one architect.
Yeah, and
Maybe like that. I don't know. But that's interesting. But probably they need more research, or they need more, because architecture is really old topic. I mean, not only about here with the building with profit. Probably they build about a social life or something like that. Maybe, yeah, maybe the most like socialist, not architecture. Architect. Yeah, they change a different level of thinking of architect. Yeah. Okay. I think they have more questions from student or not. If no, then we are okay. So thanks again, Egan and Yunin. I never met you. Maybe next time I want to Rotterdam, we can have some drink.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Thank you very much, Kai. Thank you guys for attending and being here. And yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah, let's more. If you have more questions, maybe you can write your email. If they have more questions, then
yeah,
you can send your email for asking you, especially a person.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you think your office? Also, if you guys, because somebody is studying in Europe, sometimes their office have open opportunities for internship or something. If you like to do to try to learn more things, you can apply for some positions in the office. But it definitely is valuable to learn much more things than a lecture, right? Adrian?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, whoever wants to contact us for advice or for, we are always open and happy to help and assist. And hopefully
maybe
we'll
their
also have
future has
opening soon. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah.
So nobody knows the future, because if you have some Chinese project, then you need Chinese people probably working on that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good
All
to
right.
talk today. Yeah. Let's close this meeting. And any more questions, you can send an email.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
We'll meet you next time.